The grand chamber of the Galactic Coalition hummed with anticipation. 5,000 delegates from across the known universe sat in concentric rings. Their varied anatomies, from crystalline to gaseous to hyperdimensional, all focused on the central podium. High Commander Zorvix, a 12-limbed being whose exoskeleton gleamed with bioluminescent status markings, raised his primary appendages for silence. Esteemed representatives, Zorvix's voice resonated through the neural translators. Today marks the beginning of Operation Earthfall. For too long, the Class 12 Deathworld designated Earth has remained beyond our influence. Its inhabitants, primitive but inexplicably resilient, have resisted all standard infiltration protocols. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Earth's reputation was notorious, a backwater planet whose surface teemed with biological hazards, extreme weather systems, and inexplicably lethal microorganisms. Previous surveying missions had returned with casualty rates exceeding 90%. However, Zorvix continued, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Our xenobiologists have identified a region called Oregon that represents the planet's safest zone. Temperate climate, manageable wildlife, sparse human population, the perfect landing site for our elite Deathworlder Corps. The chamber's massive viewing screen illuminated with images of dense green forests, placid lakes, and snow-capped mountains. It looked almost peaceful. I present War General Kraxus, commander of this historic mission. A massive figure strode to the podium, 8 feet tall, with armor plating that could withstand neutron bombardment. Kraxus was the epitome of the Deathworlder Corps, being specially bred and augmented to survive the galaxy's most hostile environments. His hide bore the scars of 100 campaigns across worlds where the very air could dissolve standard-issue exoskeletons. My fellow Coalition members, Kraxus's voice rumbled like distant thunder. I stand before you as the vanguard of conquest. 1,000 of my finest troops, each a veteran of at least 3 Class 10 or higher Deathworld campaigns, will establish a foothold on this primitive rock. From there, we will systematically neutralize resistance and prepare for full colonization. He gestured to a sleek, predatory being to his right. Squad Commander Koss will lead the ground operations. Science Officer Zilnax will document all biological and sociological findings. Together, we will demonstrate the inevitability of Coalition expansion. A nervous-looking delegate from the Proxima system raised a tendril. General Kraxus, previous Earth missions have encountered unexpected difficulties. How can you be certain? Because, Kraxus interrupted, baring rows of metallic teeth. We are not merely explorers or scientists. We are conquerors, bred for adversity. Earth's supposed dangers are exaggerated by the incompetent. Oregon will fall within 3 planetary rotations. The rest of the continent within 30. Total planetary subjugation within 1 local solar orbit. High Commander Zorvix nodded approvingly. This mission will be broadcast live to over 50,000 worlds. Let the universe witness the Coalition's unstoppable march of progress. In the observation gallery, Science Officer Zilnax shifted uncomfortably, 6-limbed and covered in sensory nodes. Her species excelled at data analysis and risk assessment. The General seems overconfident, she whispered to Squad Commander Koss. Koss, whose evolutionary heritage as an apex predator from the magma plains of Corxus 9 had left him with natural armor and reflexes that could intercept laser fire, merely grunted. Kraxus has survived worse. We all have. Yes, but Earth has peculiarities that defy standard classification. The biological hazards are one thing, but the inhabitants themselves... Zilnax's voice trailed off. Are primitive apes barely out of their Stone Age? Koss finished. I've studied the briefings. Their most advanced weapons are laughable. Chemical projectiles and crude atomic devices. Nothing our shields can't handle. Zilnax's sensory nodes flickered in the equivalent of a resigned sigh. I hope you're right. The mission broadcasts in 6 hours. We should prepare the troops. As they left the chamber, neither noticed the blinking alert on Zilnax's datapad, an updated intelligence report flagging anomalous behavior patterns among Earth's Oregon population. The report would remain unread as the Deathworlder Corps boarded their dropships, supremely confident in their imminent victory. The landing was flawless. 5 massive dropships, each carrying 200 elite Deathworlders, descended through Earth's atmosphere with minimal turbulence. Their stealth technology rendered them invisible to the primitive radar systems of the humans, and they touched down in a clearing deep within the Oregon forest, just as the planet's yellow sun was rising. War General Craxus emerged first, his massive armored form silhouetted against the morning light. He drew in a deep breath through his enhanced respiratory filters and scanned the surroundings. Trees, underbrush, a small stream nearby. Nothing that appeared immediately threatening. Perimeter secure, he announced to the camera drones hovering around him. Begin deployment. The broadcast was already streaming to billions of viewers across the coalition. This would be their first real-time look at an Earth conquest, carefully staged to demonstrate coalition superiority. Craxus was determined to make it a textbook operation. Squad Commander Koss emerged next, followed by teams of heavily armed Deathworlders. Within minutes, a forward command post had been established, and Science Officer Zilnax was setting up monitoring equipment to analyze the local environment. Initial readings show atmospheric composition within expected parameters. Zilnax reported, oxygen levels slightly higher than our models predicted, but within tolerance for our troops. Background radiation minimal. No immediate biological hazards detected within scan range. Craxus nodded, pleased. Deploy the command vehicle. We'll establish base camp here and begin reconnaissance immediately. The command vehicle, a massive, armored transport designed to withstand everything from acid rain to gravity fluctuations, rolled down the dropship's ramp, 20 feet tall and 40 feet long. It moved on 6 independent treads, its reinforced hull gleaming in the morning sun. Craxus was just about to board when a brown blur erupted from the forest edge. The impact was so unexpected that for a moment, no one reacted. The brown mass, later identified as a local herbivore called a deer, slammed into the command vehicle at full sprint. Its antlers, evolved to compete with rival males during mating season, pierced the vehicle's outer hull, a hull designed to withstand meteor impacts. Alarms blared. The command vehicle's left side crumpled inward. Sparks flew as critical systems shorted out. Impossible, Koss muttered, raising his plasma rifle. The deer, seemingly dazed but otherwise unharmed, staggered back, shook its head, and bounded away into the forest before anyone could fire. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the soft hiss of hydraulic fluid leaking from the damaged command vehicle. "Cut the broadcast," Craxus ordered, his voice deadly quiet. "Sir, we can't. The Coalition High Command has overridden." "Fix the vehicle. Now." Craxus turned to the troops, who stood frozen in disbelief. "Establish a defensive perimeter. This changes nothing." But it had. Across 50,000 worlds, viewers had just witnessed a supposedly indestructible coalition war machine crippled by what appeared to be an unarmed local herbivore. The comments section of the broadcast was already exploding with disbelief and mockery. As night fell on their first day, the situation deteriorated further. A series of high-pitched howls echoed through the darkness, sending waves of inexplicable terror through even the most hardened Deathworlders. 3 troops went into cardiac arrest, their neural implants overloaded by primal fear responses their training hadn't prepared them for. "It's just local fauna," Zilnax tried to reassure the increasingly agitated soldiers. "Something called a coyote, completely harmless to beings of our size and capabilities." But the damage was done, The night watch was doubled, and no one slept well. Morning brought new disasters. A reconnaissance team returned with a soldier covered in what appeared to be fine silk threads. "Just walked into it between two trees," the team leader reported. "Some kind of trap. We can't get it off." Zilnax examined the substance. Fascinating. Some kind of protein fiber with remarkable tensile strength, likely produced by a local arthropod for prey capture. "Can you remove it?" Craxus demanded. "Working on it," Zilnax replied, applying various solvents. None worked. The fibers, ordinary spider silk, refused to dissolve under even the most corrosive compounds in their arsenal. By midday, the affected soldier had to be sedated, as the sensation of the silk against his armor triggered a psychosomatic reaction that their medical team couldn't counter. The broadcast ratings were soaring. Coalition viewers couldn't look away from the unfolding disaster. That afternoon, a foraging team returned with samples of local fungi for analysis. Despite explicit orders to wait for Zilnax's clearance, 3 soldiers consumed a mushroom that their scanners had declared non-toxic. All 3 were dead within hours, their enhanced immune systems unable to counter compounds that Earth organisms had evolved alongside for millions of years. 7 casualties in under 2 planetary rotations, Koss reported grimly. "General, I recommend we abort and request extraction." "Denied," Craxus snarled. "This is a momentary setback. Deploy the communication array. We need to establish a wider surveillance perimeter and locate the nearest human settlement." The communication team, 15 specialists with equipment that could theoretically contact the galactic core from inside a neutron star, ventured half a kilometer from base camp. They never returned. The camera feeds from their neural implants showed only confused images, a weathered wooden structure, flashing colored lights, the sound of rhythmic thumping that Zilnax identified as music, then static. "What happened to them?" Zorvix demanded, his voice emanating from the emergency communicator. "The broadcast viewership has quadrupled. This is becoming a public relations catastrophe." "We're sending a rescue team," Craxus replied, dispatching 20 heavily armed Deathworlders to the communication team's last known location. The rescue team found an establishment called Rusty's Roadhouse, a dilapidated building with vehicles parked outside and a neon sign that flickered erratically. Inside, they discovered their missing comrades, not dead or captured, but participating. 3 were engaged in a ritual that involved throwing small, pointed objects at a circular target on the wall. 4 were consuming local fermented beverages that, despite containing ethanol levels that should have been toxic, seemed only to be making them louder and more animated. The rest were attempting to mimic the rhythmic movements of humans on a wooden platform, what Earth culture called dancing. "What is the meaning of this?" the rescue team leader demanded. One of the communication specialists, swaying slightly, raised a glass of amber liquid. "You gotta try this stuff. Burns like plasma fire going down. But then everything gets better." The rescue team forcibly extracted their compromised comrades, but the damage was spreading. By the time they returned to base camp, half the rescue team was humming Earth music and complaining about the buzzkill of returning to duty. Zilnax isolated the affected troops for detoxification, but the contamination, cultural rather than biological, proved resistant to standard protocols. As the 3rd day dawned, the mission that was supposed to demonstrate coalition supremacy had become a galaxy-wide entertainment sensation. Viewing parties were being held on thousands of worlds. Merchandising rights were being negotiated, and, on Earth, blissfully unaware of their role in this interstellar drama, the residents of rural Oregon were about to meet their would-be conquerors face to face. Linda Blackwell had lived in her double-wide trailer on the outskirts of Pinecrest, Oregon for 23 years. At 58, she'd seen plenty of strange things in these woods: drug runners, lost hikers, even what she'd swear was Bigfoot back in '98 after too many wine coolers at Jeanette's birthday party. But nothing had prepared her for the 8-foot-tall armored alien that came crashing through her bird feeder at 7:13 on a Tuesday morning. "Well, shit," was all she said. Coffee mug paused halfway to her lips as she stared through her kitchen window. The alien, Squad Commander Koss, though Linda wouldn't learn that until later, seemed equally surprised to find himself in her yard. He'd been leading a reconnaissance mission that had gone awry when something the science team later identified as a skunk had sprayed several of his soldiers, triggering a cascade of system failures in their environmental suits and sending them scattering in panic. Linda set down her coffee, grabbed the shotgun she kept by the door, more for rattlesnakes than home defense in these parts, and stepped onto her porch. "You're standing in my petunias," she called out. Koss's universal translator processed this strange greeting. He raised his weapon, a plasma rifle that could vaporize a tank, then hesitated. His mission parameters specified minimal engagement with locals until the conquest phase officially began. "I apologize for the intrusion. Earth female," he replied formally. "I am temporarily disoriented. Please return to your dwelling while I regroup with my unit." Linda snorted. "Earth female? Listen, honey, I've been called worse by better. You want to regroup? Fine. But first, you're going to help me fix this bird feeder you just demolished. My chickadees depend on that." Koss stared in disbelief. According to all intelligence, humans confronted with superior forces should exhibit fear, aggression, or submission. This weathered female with her gray-streaked hair and faded bathrobe displayed none of these. Instead, she was ordering him around. Before he could formulate a response, Linda had thrust a dented metal pole into his hands. "Hold this straight while I get the screws," she instructed, disappearing back into her dwelling. Koss found himself obeying automatically, program deference to chain of command, momentarily confused by this bizarre encounter. By the time Linda returned with a toolbox, 3 more of his soldiers had emerged from the woods, their armor stained with the skunk's defensive spray. "Friends of yours?" Linda asked, unscrewing the feeder from its bent bracket. "They smell like they tangled with Pepe Le Pew." "They have been compromised by a local defensive chemical," Koss explained stiffly. "No kidding. Get 'em around back to the hose. Tomato juice is what you need, but I've only got 2 cans. Might take the edge off, though." The absurdity reached new heights as Linda directed elite Deathworlders, beings who had survived acid storms and gravity wells, to stand in her backyard while she sprayed them with a garden hose. More baffling still, the simple water pressure seemed to effectively remove the skunk spray that had resisted their advanced decontamination protocols. "You're not from the government, are you?" Linda asked as she worked. "'Cause you've got that same useless, over-engineered look about you. My brother-in-law works for the Forest Service, and they spent $6 million on a bear-proof trash can that any raccoon with half a brain can crack open in 30 seconds. We are not affiliated with your Earth governments," Koss replied carefully. "Uh-huh. Well, you're sure as hell not from around here. Aliens, I'm guessing." Koss's training hadn't covered this scenario. "Our presence is classified." Linda laughed. "Classified? Buddy, you're 8 feet tall with 4 arms and a face like a lobster had a baby with a power strip. Classified went out the window the minute you stepped into Pinecrest." As if to prove her point, a battered pickup truck rumbled up Linda's gravel driveway. A heavy-set man with a beard and a cap emblazoned with "Bigfoot Believe" stepped out, phone already recording. "Holy shit, Linda, you seeing this too? I'm not on mushrooms this time." "Morning, Vince," Linda called casually. "Yeah, they're real. Crashed through my bird feeder. Been helping 'em get cleaned up after Jeanette's skunk got 'em." Vince approached slowly, phone still extended. "This is going straight to YouTube. Finally gonna prove to my ex-wife I'm not crazy." Koss attempted to salvage the situation. "Citizen, cease recording immediately. This is a matter of galactic security." Vince just grinned wider. Galactic security. That's awesome. Man. Hey, can you say, "Take me to your leader" for the video? Classic stuff. By nightfall, clips of the encounter had spread across human social media platforms. The hashtag #OregonAliens was trending globally. And in a cruel twist of irony, these same clips were being intercepted by coalition surveillance systems and incorporated into the official broadcast. Now the highest-rated program in coalition history. War General Craxus watched in mounting horror as his elite invasion force became an interstellar laughingstock. Worse, the cultural contamination was spreading. Troops who had made contact with locals were returning with inexplicable behaviors, consuming substances called Doritos and Mountain Dew, adopting local phrases like "dude" and "chill out," and in one particularly disturbing case, wearing something called a Blazers jersey. This mission is compromised beyond repair. High Commander Zorvix's voice crackled through the emergency channel. But viewership is at unprecedented levels. Continue operations while we assess the strategic value of this entertainment phenomenon. Entertainment? Craxus roared. We've lost 30 troops to local hazards. Another 50 are culturally contaminated, and our command vehicle remains inoperable. This is a military disaster. A military disaster that 3 trillion sentient beings are watching live. Zorvix replied coolly. Adapt your strategy, General. Find a way to turn this situation to our advantage. The communication cut off, leaving Craxus seething. He turned to Zilnax, who was analyzing samples from the growing collection of Earth artifacts their troops were bringing back. Everything from beer cans to fishing lures, to something called a fidget spinner. "What is happening to my soldiers?" he demanded. Zilnax's sensory nodes pulsed thoughtfully. "I believe they're experiencing a form of rapid cultural adaptation. Earth's hazards aren't just biological or environmental. They're mimetic. Ideas spreading like viruses." "Ideas can't defeat Deathworlders," Craxus scoffed. "With respect, General, the evidence suggests otherwise. Our troops are adopting local behaviors at an alarming rate. Squad 6 returned from reconnaissance, wearing decorative head coverings with team logos. Squad 3 has established a poker night, and Squad Commander Koss appears to be developing a rapport with the local humans." As if summoned by his name, Koss entered the command tent. He looked different. His posture was relaxed, his usual military precision replaced by a loose-limbed swagger, and he was eating something from a crinkly bag. "Sup, General," he said, a greeting that made Craxus's eye ridges twitch with irritation. "Report, Commander," Craxus growled. "Right. So, we've been invited to something called a barbecue at Linda's place tomorrow. I think it's a peace negotiation, but with meat. Also, got some intel on local defense systems." He tossed a paper bag onto the table. "They call these firecrackers, primitive explosives, but the psychological effect is notable. They use them for celebrations, apparently." Craxus stared at his once reliable second-in-command. "You've been compromised, cuz..." "Nah, man. I'm just adapting. These humans, they're something else. Did you know they voluntarily consume capsaicin as a challenge? They call it the one-chip challenge. Takakota down at the gas station gave me one. Thought I was gonna die. But then, like endorphins kicked in. Wild stuff." "Who is Takakota?" Craxus demanded. "Local merchant. Cool dude. Has these drinks called energy drinks. Totally legal stimulants. Want one?" Kaz produced a garishly colored can from a compartment in his armor. Before Craxus could respond, alarms blared throughout the camp. A perimeter breach. "We're under attack!" Craxus reached for his weapon. Zilnax checked her monitors. "Negative, General. It appears to be small local fauna. Something called raccoons. The creatures, masked bandits with dexterous paws and problem-solving intelligence that would impress many coalition scientists, had infiltrated the food storage area. Despite the most advanced security systems in the galaxy, they had somehow bypassed every measure and were now feasting on the expedition's supplies. "Shoot them!" Craxus ordered. "Sir," a nervous soldier reported, "our weapon systems aren't calibrated for targets this small and agile, and they appear to be working together." It was true. The raccoons displayed coordinated tactics, with some creating distractions, while others breached containers. When troops approached, they scattered in different directions, regrouping once the threat had passed. "Fascinating," Zilnax murmured. "Primitive collective intelligence. We could learn from—" "Enough!" Craxus roared. "Cuz, get your troops under control, secure the perimeter, and get rid of those things." But Kos was already pulling something from his pocket, a small package labeled beef jerky. "Chill, General. I got this." He tore open the package and tossed pieces in an arc away from the camp. The raccoons, smelling the preserved meat, abandoned their raid to investigate the new food source. "See? No need for plasma rifles. Just gotta speak their language." Craxus stared in disbelief. His elite force, the pride of the coalition, reduced to bribing local wildlife with dried meat products. The broadcast ratings would be astronomical. As if the situation couldn't get more absurd, a new alert pinged on Zilnax's console. Her sensory nodes flared with alarm. "General, we have a new problem. A much bigger problem." The long-range scanners had detected a massive energy signature entering the solar system, a signature that matched no known coalition vessel. "The Void Regime," Zilnax whispered. Even Kos sobered immediately. The Void Regime, interstellar pirates and scavengers who preyed on vulnerable worlds, were the coalition's most feared adversaries. If they had detected the broadcast and realized Earth was largely undefended, "They'll strip this planet bare," Craxus said, his earlier frustrations forgotten in the face of a true threat. "How many ships?" "A full war fleet," Zilnax reported grimly. "Estimated time to Earth orbit, 6 hours." For the first time since landing, Craxus felt a cold certainty settle over him. With his forces scattered and compromised, standard coalition reinforcements days away, and Earth's primitive defenses useless against void technology, they faced a genuine catastrophe. "Alert High Command," he ordered, "and inform our local contacts. They deserve to know what's coming." Linda's double-wide trailer had never been designed to host interstellar war councils, but necessity made for strange accommodations. Around her kitchen table sat an improbable alliance: War General Craxus, Squad Commander Kos, Science Officer Zilnax, Linda herself, Vince from down the road, Jeanette, who owned the local diner, Malik from the gas station, and his nephew Takakota, a community college student home for the summer. "So, what you're saying," Linda summarized, refilling coffee mugs around the table, "is that these void people are basically space pirates who want to strip mine our planet, and they'll be here by morning." "That is correct," Craxus confirmed grimly. "The Void Regime harvests resources with no regard for indigenous life. They detected our broadcast and realized Earth is vulnerable. And your big fancy space army can't get here in time," Vince added, scratching his beard. "Coalition reinforcements are mobilizing, but the nearest battle group is 3 days away," Zilnax explained. "By then, the Void will have established ground operations and begun resource extraction." "Resource extraction," Jeanette repeated flatly. "You mean they'll start digging up our homes?" "Among other things," Kos said. "The Void considers biological material a resource too. That includes people." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Outside, through the window, they could see more locals arriving. Word had spread quickly through the rural community. Pickup trucks and SUVs filled Linda's yard and spilled down the dirt road. People brought what weapons they had, mostly hunting rifles and shotguns. Some carried more unusual items: chainsaws, propane tanks, fertilizer bags. Those won't be effective against void technology, Kraxus said, nodding toward the gathering arsenal. Maybe not directly, Takakota said, speaking up for the first time. The young man had been quietly tapping on a laptop throughout the discussion. But we don't need to match their tech. We just need to be unpredictable. What are you thinking, Tak? Malik asked his nephew. I'm thinking we've got about 200 people out there. Plus, whatever's left of your alien squad. He nodded to Kraxus. The Void expects to find a primitive world with some scattered coalition forces. They don't expect resistance. We use that. Linda smiled slowly. Guerrilla warfare. My granddaddy fought in Vietnam. Said the scariest thing wasn't the big armies. It was never knowing where the next attack would come from. Precisely. Zilnax's sensory nodes pulsed with interest. Asymmetric tactics utilizing local knowledge and resources. Takakota turned his laptop around. On the screen was a topographical map of the area. They'll probably land here. Same clearing you aliens used. It's the obvious spot, so we don't fight them there. We let them land. Let them think it's safe. Then hit them from all sides using the terrain. Kraxus studied the map with growing respect. This could work, but we'd need to coordinate your people with our remaining forces, and we'd need more effective weapons. About that, Vince grinned, pulling out his phone. I put the word out when this all started. Got some friends coming who might help with the firepower situation. As if on cue, the rumble of massive engines filled the air. 3 enormous vehicles pulled into view, monster trucks, their massive tires taller than a man, chassis modified with homemade armor plating and improvised weapons. Dwight's Monster Jam crew, Vince explained proudly. They were doing a show in Portland. Drove all night to get here. Kraxus stared in disbelief at the garish vehicles with names like Skull Crusher and Apocalypse Now emblazoned on their sides. Those are war machines? Nah, Vince chuckled. Entertainment. But Dwight used to be military. Man knows how to modify an engine to do things the manufacturer never intended. More vehicles were arriving, dirt bikes, ATVs, even farming equipment. A combine harvester rumbled up, its farmer owner tipping his hat to the assembled group. Heard y'all need some help with pest control, he called out. Koss grinned, his mandibles clicking with excitement. General, I think we found our army. Throughout the night, an improbable battle plan took shape. Zilnax provided technical specifications on void technology and vulnerabilities. Kraxus organized the remaining Deathworlders into strike teams, and the humans brought local knowledge and improvised weaponry that defied conventional military logic. Takakota set up a communication network using everything from walkie-talkies to a hastily coded messaging app. Jeanette turned her diner into a commissary, feeding the growing resistance force with bottomless coffee and pancakes. And Linda, surprising everyone, revealed a detailed knowledge of explosives. Worked in a quarry for 20 years, she explained, mixing chemicals with practiced ease. These won't breach their ship hulls, but they'll make one hell of a distraction. By dawn, an army unlike any the galaxy had ever seen was ready. 600 humans, 300 Deathworlders, monster trucks, farm equipment, hunting rifles, improvised explosives, and one last, desperate plan to save Earth. They were still outnumbered and outgunned. The Void regime's warfleet carried thousands of soldiers and planet-killing weapons. But as the first Void ships began to breach Earth's atmosphere, Kraxus felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of warfare, genuine uncertainty about the outcome. This plan is insane, he told Koss as they watched the massive black ships descend toward the clearing. It violates every principle of coalition military doctrine. Yeah, Koss agreed, adjusting the baseball cap he'd taken to wearing. That's why it might just work. The Void regime's flagship, a massive vessel that blotted out the morning sun, touched down in the clearing where Kraxus's expedition had landed 5 days earlier. Smaller craft followed, forming a perimeter. Ramps extended, and the first wave of Void soldiers emerged, faceless figures in black armor, carrying disintegrator rifles. From their hiding places in the surrounding forest, the improbable alliance watched and waited. Humans with hunting rifles lay beside Deathworlders with plasma weapons. Monster trucks idled quietly behind ridgelines. And in the trees, Takakota's drone network hovered, providing real-time surveillance that fed to tablets and phones throughout the resistance force. "They're deploying harvester units," Zilnax reported from her position. "Standard Void procedure. Establish a perimeter, then begin immediate resource extraction." "Wait for them to fully commit," Kraxus ordered through the communication network. "Let them think they're safe." The Void commander, a tall figure with distinctive red markings on its armor, surveyed the clearing with obvious satisfaction. Earth was even more resource-rich than their scans had suggested, and with only scattered coalition forces to contend with, the harvest would be quick and profitable. The commander gave the signal to begin operations. Massive drilling equipment began to descend from the ships. Harvester units fanned out, their sensors seeking valuable minerals and biological specimens. "Now," Kraxus transmitted. The attack began with Linda's improvised explosives detonating simultaneously at 12 points around the Void perimeter. Not powerful enough to breach their armor, but more than sufficient to create confusion. As the Void soldiers turned toward the explosions, the real assault began. From the ridge above the clearing, 3 monster trucks roared into view, engines modified to produce deafening noise. They crashed through the tree line, massive tires crushing smaller Void equipment and scattering soldiers. "Yee-haw!" Dwight's voice boomed over a loudspeaker as his truck, Skull Crusher, plowed through a formation of Void troops. "This is for Earth, you alien sumbitches." The Void commander, recovering quickly from the surprise, ordered a counterattack. Disintegrator fire lashed out, scoring hits on one of the monster trucks. But even as it began to smolder, the driver aimed straight for a drilling platform and leaped clear at the last second. The resulting collision sent machinery and Void soldiers flying. From the forest, Coalition Deathworlders and human hunters opened fire. The combination of plasma weapons and conventional bullets created a confusing array of threats that Void targeting systems struggled to prioritize. "They're adapting," Zilnax warned as Void troops began to form defensive formations. Deploying heavy weapons. A massive cannon emerged from the flagship, its barrel swiveling toward the tree line where the heaviest fire was concentrated. "Phase 2, Kraxus ordered. On this signal, Takakota activated his drone network. 50 consumer drones, everything from expensive photography models to toys, each modified with Zilnax's help to carry small payloads, rose from concealed positions around the battlefield. The Void, expecting conventional attacks, were unprepared for this swarm of tiny flying devices. The drones darted between soldiers, dropping payloads of seemingly harmless materials: flour, fine sawdust, glitter, and an especially sticky honey from Jeanette's pantry. Targeting their environmental filters, Zilnax explained to the confused humans on the network. Void troops rely on external air processing. These particles will clog their systems. Sure enough, Void soldiers began to stagger as their armor's life support systems faltered. Some clawed desperately at their helmets, which sealed automatically in Earth's alien atmosphere. The cannon fired, obliterating a section of forest, but hitting nothing of value, as the resistance fighters had already relocated based on Takakota's tactical guidance. "Phase 3, Kraxus transmitted, raising a simple flare gun Linda had given him. He fired, and the red flare arced high above the battlefield. At this signal, farm equipment roared to life. The combine harvester, driven by its stone-faced farmer owner, crashed through the Void's eastern flank. ATVs and dirt bikes swarmed from all directions. Their riders, both human and Deathworlder, wielding an assortment of weapons from chainsaws to Kasa's beloved baseball bats. The battle descended into chaos, exactly as planned. Void soldiers, trained for conventional warfare against organized military forces, found themselves surrounded by unpredictable enemies, using incomprehensible tactics. A group of teenagers on BMX bikes pedaled through the battlefield, tossing homemade smoke bombs that released clouds of purple smoke laced with capsaicin extract. The one-chip challenge, weaponized. Void sensors, calibrated for toxic gases, couldn't properly categorize this irritant, leaving soldiers blind and disoriented. Linda herself drove her ancient pickup truck straight into a squad of Void troops, leapt out at the last moment, and detonated another improvised explosive that sent the vehicle, gas tank strategically overfilled, into a fireball that engulfed a harvester unit. "Their command structure is faltering," Zilnax reported, monitoring Void communications from a hastily established signal intercept station in Linda's trailer. "They can't make sense of our attack pattern." "Because there isn't one," Koss laughed, swinging a baseball bat that had been wrapped in barbed wire, a modification suggested by Vince, who claimed it was straight out a Walking Dead man. The Void commander, seeing the battle slipping away, made a desperate decision. A retreat signal flashed, and Void troops began fighting their way back to the ships. The harvester platforms retracted, half-loaded with Earth samples. Ramps began to close. "They're pulling out," Craxus realized with shock. "We've done it!" But the Void had one final move. The flagship's main cannon, recalibrated for maximum dispersal, targeted the center of the resistance forces. A weapon designed to level cities, about to fire on Linda's ragtag army. "Everyone scatter!" Craxus ordered, but he knew many wouldn't make it clear in time. As the cannon charged, a strange buzzing filled the air. From the nearby woods, a dark cloud rose and swarmed toward the Void flagship. "Bees," Jeanette said in wonder. "That's Old Man Herschel's apiary. Meanest honeybees in 3 counties. Thousands, perhaps millions, of agitated bees descended on the Void ships. They found every seam, every exhaust port, every crack in armor, and they entered in stinging, sacrificial waves. Inside the flagship, alarms blared as environmental systems registered thousands of small organic intrusions. Circuits shorted as crushed bee bodies leaked conductive fluid across control panels. The charging cannon powered down as emergency overrides engaged. The bees, as if guided by some greater intelligence, focused their assault on the flagship's bridge. The Void commander, swatting desperately at the insects penetrating their command center, gave the final retreat order. With a roar of engines, the Void ships lifted off, not in the orderly departure of a tactical withdrawal, but in the panicked flight of a force routed and demoralized. They accelerated through the atmosphere, abandoning equipment and even some of their own troops in their haste to escape the incomprehensible defense they had encountered. As the ships dwindled to specks in the blue Oregon sky, a stunned silence fell over the battlefield. Then, gradually, cheers began to rise. Humans embraced Deathworlders. Linda clapped Craxus on his armored back. Takakota's drone swarm performed an impromptu victory dance in the air above them. "We won?" Craxus said in disbelief. "Hell yeah, we did," Kaz grinned, his mandibles clicking rapidly in excitement. "Oregon style, baby!" The celebration lasted well into the night. Jeanette's diner became the headquarters for an interspecies victory party. Humans taught Deathworlders to line dance. Zilnax discovered she had a talent for karaoke, and Craxus, ever the professional soldier, found himself drawn into a drinking contest with Linda and several other locals that ended with him passed out under a pool table. Multiple honorary tattoos drawn on his exoskeleton in permanent marker. 3 days later, when Coalition reinforcements finally arrived, they found a scene that defied explanation. The remaining Deathworlders had integrated into the local community. Some were helping rebuild damaged structures. Others had adopted local customs and attire to a degree that violated multiple Coalition protocols. One was even operating the grill at Jeanette's diner, his 4 arms expertly flipping burgers while wearing an apron that read, Kiss the cook, if you dare. High Commander Zorvix, leading the reinforcement fleet personally, due to the unprecedented nature of the situation, was escorted to Linda's trailer, which still served as the de facto headquarters. General Kraxus, Zorvix addressed the war-scarred veteran formally. Explain this situation. Kraxus, who had abandoned parts of his armor for more comfortable Earth clothing, met his superior's gaze steadily. Sir, I believe my final report will clarify everything, but the short version is, we won against the Void regime with this. Zorvix gestured at the peculiar mix of technology and primitive tools scattered around the command center. Yes, sir. With them. Kraxus indicated the humans bustling around the trailer. Earth isn't just a Class 12 death world because of its environment or biology. It's the inhabitants. They're unpredictable, creative, adaptable in ways our training never prepared us for. They're insane, Koss added cheerfully, entering with a tray of coffee mugs. But in a good way. Zorvix's mandibles twitched with barely contained outrage. Your mission was to conquer this world, not fraternize with it. With respect, sir, Kraxus replied. Conquest would be a mistake. Not because we couldn't eventually succeed, but because we'd be destroying the very thing that makes this planet valuable. And what's that, General? Their culture, Zilnax interjected, entering with datapads. It's infectious, sir, like a benign parasite that rewires neural pathways. Their music, their humor, their food, their bizarre social rituals. They're all carriers for thought patterns that bypass our standard cognitive defenses. Zorvix stared at his once elite officers. You've all been compromised. Enlightened, Kraxus corrected. Sir, I recommend Earth be classified as a quarantined world, not for our protection, but for the Coalition's. If their culture were to spread throughout our systems. Too late for that, Linda chuckled, appearing from the kitchen. Your broadcast reached 50,000 worlds, remember? Most popular show in the galaxy, from what your people tell me. We've already got licensing deals for Oregon-style hot sauce on 18 planets. Zorvix looked from Linda to his officers in horror as the implications sank in. The cultural contamination had already begun. Even now, across Coalition space, beings were adopting Earth phrases, replicating Earth foods, mimicking Earth behaviors that they'd witnessed in the broadcast. Quarantine protocols initiated immediately. Zorvix ordered into his communicator. Full isolation of all personnel who've had Earth contact. Classification, mimetic hazard, Class X. Won't work, Koss said, sipping his coffee. Cat's out of the bag, sir. Or should I say, raccoons in the trash. 1 week later, the last Coalition ships departed Earth orbit. Of the 1,000 Deathworlders who had landed, only War General Kraxus returned, designated as the sole authorized contact between Earth and the Coalition, tasked with monitoring the cultural quarantine that everyone, including Kraxus himself, knew was already failing. In the Grand Chamber, before the assembled delegates of 5,000 worlds, Kraxus delivered his final report. His once pristine armor was battle-scarred and decorated with inexplicable stickers. A small toy, something called a bobblehead, sat on the podium beside him, nodding in agreement as he spoke. Earth cannot be conquered, he concluded. Not by weapons or technology or conventional warfare. Its true defense isn't its environment, though that claimed many of our troops. It's not its biology, though that proved more hazardous than our most extreme models predicted. Earth's true power is its culture, adaptive, absurd, irrepressible. He displayed images that made many delegates recoil. Humans consuming competitive quantities of a substance called hot wings until they wept. Vehicles deliberately modified to be louder and less efficient. Clothing styles that changed for no apparent reason, other than vibes. Music that combined discordant elements into addictive patterns. And memes. Endless, evolving, infectious memes that could rewrite thought patterns more effectively than the most advanced coalition behavioral conditioning. "I recommend Earth be classified not as a death world," Craxus said, "but as something new entirely. A memetic hazard zone. Contact should be limited to necessary diplomatic channels, and all personnel should undergo extensive decontamination." "And the Deathworlders who remained?" a delegate asked. Craxus's expression softened. "They have made their choice, as I nearly did myself." His hand went to a small object hidden beneath his armor, a keychain from Rusty's Roadhouse that Linda had given him as a parting gift. "Will the Void regime return?" another delegate questioned. "Unlikely," Craxus replied. "Their defeat was broadcast across their territories as well. No Void commander would risk the humiliation of a second failure against, what was it Vince called it? A bunch of backwoods rednecks with attitude." As the chamber erupted into debates about quarantine protocols and cultural containment strategies, Craxus stepped away from the podium. His official duty was complete, but he knew, as he fingered the keychain in his pocket, that he would return to Earth. The infection, friendship, he corrected himself, had taken hold too deeply to resist. And somewhere in Oregon, Linda was keeping a spare room ready, just in case her alien friends decided to drop by again. There was always room for one more at the table, she'd said, even if that one had 4 arms and mandibles. In the end, of the 1,000 Deathworlders who landed on Earth's safest zone, only one returned to tell the tale. But the story he told wasn't one of defeat. It was one of transformation. And across 50,000 worlds, beings who had watched the broadcast began asking questions that coalition authorities found deeply troubling. What is a high five? How does one perform this keg stand? And most dangerous of all, when is the next episode?